Have you ever asked GitHub Copilot to generate code and this is something completely useless? Most developers think Copilot is the problem, but in reality, the problem is usually the prompt. In this video, I will show you a simple framework that can improve GitHub Copilot results dramatically and help you generate cleaner, production ready code. Hello everyone, welcome back. In previous videos, I explained about what is GitHub Copilot and how to create prompt files. Today we are going deeper into something even more important, that is called prompt engineering. Think of GitHub Copilot as a very smart junior developer. The quality of instructions you provide determines the quality of code you receive. Let me explain why prompt engineering matters. For example, here it is the prompt, create login form. So if you give prompt like this, let me show how result we get. So this is the Visual Studio Code. I am using the IDE to generate the code and I have already logged into this GitHub Copilot. So let me run this prompt. So here I did not give much information for this prompt. Just I mentioned like create the login form. So based on the existing code, it is trying to analyze the code and based on that it is going to create the login form. So let's see what attributes it creates, because I did not mention any attributes and also I did not mention what kind of UI we have to use for this one. Okay, now it seems it created some of the code. Okay, so here it created the login form. So let's see, it is created only username and password. But if you want to add few more fields for this login form, it did not create because you did not mention that information. So let me show the good prompt. Here it is the good prompt. So here what I'm mentioning is like create a responsive reactive login form using bootstraps. So here also I'm mentioning the technology and here mentioning the what fields we need to include into the login form. Okay, so if you give prompt like this, so this is a good prompt. So if you give like this one, it generate the code accordingly. So this way the prompt engineering, it's really matters. So because you have to mention your requirements very carefully. Okay, so to implement these kind of prompts, we have some framework that is called CPR framework. Here in CPR, C is nothing but context. So in this prompt, so I am mentioning about the context. Context is nothing but, for example, what technology you want to use and what is the project type and what environment you use. So here I am mentioning the bootstrap file. So here I am mentioning the context has the technology. Okay, now the second one is the purpose. So what is the main purpose of your request? Here my main purpose is creating the login form. So here I'm mentioning the request login form. Okay, and I'm also including the responsive request. In the previous prompt we did not mention anything response design, but here I'm including the responsive React login. So this is the main purpose for this one. And in CPR framework, last one is the R. R is nothing but requirements. So what are your requirements on, is there any constraints for this requirement? Here my requirement is this one. I need to include this email field and password. Along with that, I want to add validations for this and also I want to add the error messages. We have to handle the error messages. So these are the requirements for this. So if you follow this CPR framework, you can get the expected results. So let's see here. So here it followed this one. See how it is created this email and password. It is also validating like whether this email is valid or not and password is valid or not. So like this, based on this requirement, the code has been generated. Okay, and let me show one more prompt for creating the dashboard. For example, if you want to create the dashboard for the React application, if you simply give this create dashboard, it may create some generalized dashboard. But this is the prompt, it followed the CPR framework. Here I am mentioning the React dashboard component. So here I am mentioning the technology as React. Okay, and my requirement is these are the things, like we have to use the bootstrap and it should be the responsive design and summary codes, all these things. So these are the constraints I have mentioned for creating the dashboard. Okay, and let me show one more good prompt like API development example. So here I want to create some REST API endpoint. So we have to mention like what is the request type. It is like a get request, post request, that kind of thing. So here I mentioned the request type, and I'm also validating error handling, input validation, and also logging also I'm including in this code. So in this way, based on the requirements, the Copilot generate the code. This Copilot is not just generating the code, it is generating architecture patterns based on your instructions. Okay, now I want to show one more example, like generate the user story. So here I am talking about generating the user story. Okay, it means it can also help with planning, documentation, and DevOps activities along with the code generation. So I can also use this one for generating the user story. So for this we have to use a prompt like this. Okay, so to use this GitHub Copilot very useful, we have to follow some best practices. Mostly users use these common mistakes. One is like the prompt is very short. For example, create an API. If you see here, so these are the bar prompt like create login form or create dashboard. These are very small prompt. So Copilot may not understand exact context for this. So we have to clearly explain the requirement. And also most of the user does not mention the context. Here context is very important. So based on that only it generates the output. Okay, and we have to add some constraints. For example, constraints is nothing but here I'm clearing mentioning the constraints. It is the best one. Like constraint is nothing but we have to use the validation and also error messages. For example, if you want to give some database kind of prompt, instead of simply mentioning like create database, you have to mention like what are the table name and which database, like Oracle or PostgreSQL, what kind of database you want to use. You have to mention all this in the constraints. So based on that it will generate the code based on your requirements. Okay, and so we have going to give some good tips. So before creating the prompts, use these things like mention the framework explicitly, what kind of frameworks you want to use. For example, if you are developing the Java application, you can mention like we have to use the Java related code styling, so it generates the code accordingly. And also we have to mention like along with the code you have to ask like writing the unit test cases, because unit testing also importance along with the code generation. And also you can mention like error handling, you have to, are you handling the exception properly or not, those things you have to mention. Finally, I want to say that great code starts with great prompt. So use this CPR framework. So in this CPR, like context, purpose and requirements. So these are main important. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe in this video, and I'm going to explain more videos about GitHub Copilot and how we can write the better code like a senior software developer. Thank you.